Welcome to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well, broadcasting on KSQD Santa Cruz 90.7 FM and live streaming at ksqd.org. I'm the producer and host, Debra Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist, and my pronouns are she, her. Today's show is a continuation of a series we started last month to honor Mental Health Awareness Month. This is our second show in this series, exploring the question, what's your soul food? Last month, we heard a lot of great ideas and examples about where our listeners are finding their soul food nutrition. Today, we're going to get to hear more. We'll be hearing from a whole new group of community members sharing a whole new array of their favorite soul food delights. For this conversation, I'm again joined by a colleague and State of Mind returning guest, psychotherapist Kara Bowman, and together we'll be discussing how to use these soul food choices to improve your mental and physical health. If you like what you're hearing today, be sure to check out last month's show, episode 42, part 1 of the Building Resilience, What's Your Soul Food series. Both shows in this series are about self-care and the many ways we can take care of and nurture our bodies and minds. But it's also about a lot more than that. All of the activities and practices we'll be hearing about also build resilience to help us face the really hard stuff in life. When we feed our own souls, we're more internally resourced, and in turn can then be more available to be kind to others, feel compassion, and offer support to family or others in our communities. Finding and engaging with our soul foods is what helps us be the best version of ourselves possible. And who could say no to that? However, we also recognize that a show like this, filled with all these great ideas about all the ways you could be taking care of yourself, runs the risk of activating the critic that lives in all of us. The critic that can tell us, in a rather harsh voice, all the things we should be doing if only we were a better person. But please know that that is not our intention here. You're already doing the best you can, and at the same time, it's possible there might be something here that speaks to you, that would feel nurturing and could be supportive. So we want to ask you to listen from a place of holding yourself with love and compassion, and think of these things as possible scaffolding that can hold you up and together in hard times. And trust that you will approach your own self-care at a pace and in ways that you are ready for. You'll also hear many of the contributors talk about their own imperfections in their efforts to care for themselves, and sometimes even modeling that self-acceptance in their own stories. My guest today, Kara Bowman, is a marriage and family therapist in private practice who's also an author, speaker, and trainer. Kara's a nonviolent communication trainer, certified grief counselor, and certified trauma therapist. Kara uses many modalities in her work, including focusing, which is self-connecting, compassion-based therapies, and neurobiology-informed therapies. Kara volunteers her time for many organizations, including Hospice of Santa Cruz County. Kara is passionate about using research-based methods to help people change lifelong patterns, even in the midst of difficult events. Welcome, Kara. I'm so glad you're back with us today to talk more about this fun topic of soul food.
I'm so happy to be back with you, Deborah. You're becoming part of my soul food, I think. And before we start, I want to share with listeners a little bit more about you. So your host, Debra Sloss, is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 25 years of clinical experience. She's a certified DBT therapist and has extensive training in a variety of therapeutic modalities, including internal family systems and narrative therapy, among others. For more than 10 years, she served as clinical supervisor at a local agency, teaching, mentoring, and supporting many of the therapists working in our community today. One of Debra's mainstay soul foods is volunteering in her community, whether it's creating and hosting this radio program to raise mental health awareness, designing and running a school arts enrichment program, volunteering for the National Alliance on Mental Health, or cooking up a pot of soup for delivery community members facing health challenges or loss. Deborah can usually be found with her sleeves rolled up, cooking up something to share with her community. Her personal soul food diet includes swimming, time in nature, yoga, hikes with friends, gardening, and finding new ways to preserve the many fruits of her garden.
Thanks, Kara. Well, let's get started. In this show today, we're going to be sharing soul food audio contributions from our listeners. And after each, Kara and I are going to elaborate on why and how those soul food choices support physical and mental health and build resilience. I'm thinking we'll start off by defining the term resilience. It's a noun, and in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definitions are the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness, or the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, also elasticity. So, in mental health, resilience is the ability to adapt to difficult situations. When stress, adversity, or trauma strikes, you still experience anger, grief, and pain, but you're able to keep functioning or bounce it back, both physically and psychologically. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to hear how people are doing this from a bunch of our listeners and contributors. To start this off, we're going to hear from a man who found his soul food in the most unlikely places.
Hi, I'm Michael. After retiring from 40 years in law enforcement, mainly working in the jail, I happened upon something that brings out the best version of myself, dancing. I was, like many others, in a gym membership that I would go for a total of 2 weeks. Something wasn't satisfying enough for me to go to the gym. Now I dance as a student or a teacher several times a week. It started 15 years ago when 2 ladies at a birthday party invited me to dance and informed me that male dancers were in great demand. With 2 left feet, I took the beginning swing class 3 times, but it was easy to go as the instructor and the dancers, who all seemed to enjoy themselves being themselves. I, too, noticed that the best version of myself when I was dancing. Dancing has provided me with a fun exercise, friends, and community, and a sense of purpose. Working in the jail, I always try to have others find the best in themselves. Teaching people to dance is now my way of helping others find fun and maybe even the best in themselves. My last tip is to find a dance instructor who makes it fun for you. For my most senior country western line dancers, I lower the music speed and adapt the dance so they can always see me. There's always ways to make dancing accessible. Keep on dancing, I always say. The most important goal of dancing is to have fun. Yee-haw! Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. You know, here we have a theme that we talked about in the last show, which was the importance and role that music can play in our soul food nurturance. And I'm wondering if you want to lead off here, Kara.
Yeah, he talks about music and movement and putting the two together. They are, I mean, think about how ancient that is. People working out emotions through dance. It's one of the most ancient and sacred forms of self-care, I think, and doing that in community. He named it. There's very little for me to say. He's replenished by doing that. He gets exercise, funds, friends, community, purpose. Another thing that struck me about what Michael said is there's a lot of research showing that resilience in aging comes from the ability to adapt. So as we lose certain physical facilities, the ability to come up with new things that we can do is the key to successful aging. And Michael just beautifully talked about that, both for himself and facilitating that for other people.
So, in this next audio piece, Andrea, who's prone to anxiety, shares such a wide breadth of practices that have helped steady her through some of the big life challenges she's faced.
My name is Andrea. I'm a psychotherapist and an author and a meditation teacher, and I am on the other side of decades of an eating disorder, drug and alcohol abuse, and anxiety and depression, debilitating. So I am so passionate about helping others heal in the ways that I have been fortunate enough to heal. And I think for soul food, I have so many things that feed me and fill my soul and feed my soul. Nature is probably number one, walking in the forest or going to the beach, putting my feet in the ocean or swimming, just being connected to nature. And I can also do that. I do that a lot at home, visualizing being in nature. Part of a meditation practice for me is visualizing being in places that I love and that feed my soul. I love to paint rocks and give them to people. Giving them away is more fun maybe than making them, but close. And I love laughing. I do a lot of laughter yoga, and I really love that. And reading. So I would say those are probably my top soul foods. And thank you, and wishing everyone well.
Just beautiful. She touches on so many of the themes that we have been talking about. Wondering if you want to just lead this one off, Kara.
Sure. One of the things that struck me about Andrea is the variety in what she talked about. She enjoys being in nature, and she enjoys painting rocks and giving them away, the connection with other people, laughing, yoga, reading, visualizing. I mean, there's just such an incredible variety touching all different needs she has. And so I really appreciate that. And I imagine that comes from many years of experimenting and finding out what works for her. Maybe this is a good time to say that many people are experimenting and finding out what works for them. We think of this as being a big issue in the pandemic, but according to Google Trends, the number of searches for self-care has more than tripled over the last 10 years. It spiked at the beginning of the pandemic, but it has been rising steadily for many years. It peaks every winter and it's lower in the summer months. And that may just be because we're better at doing self-care. We're more, as you keep bringing up play and fun, more play and fun and connection in the summer. And then there's, lack of sun in this winter, but also a little bit more isolation in the winter. So this has been something people have been more and more interested in.
I just wanted to, I want to jump in there, Kara, because it makes me think of a trip I took once to Maine. And I was thinking, what do people do here in the winter? I mean, in Maine. And I asked a lot of people. I was just really curious, because I was there in summer and you saw like boats out and crab pots and you saw all this activity. And I was like, well, what is winter like for you? And, interestingly, the thing I heard over and over and over again was reading. People really, so in some kind of climates, self-care is going to look really different. Unlike here in Santa Cruz, where often we can maintain the same things throughout the year, in some climates, you're going to really change your palette dramatically depending on the time of year. And so, Andrea mentioned the role of reading, and I just want to say that that's a big one for a lot of people. You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD Santa Cruz. K-Squid, many voices, one station. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. I'm your host, Debra Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist. And I'm here with our guest today, psychotherapist Kara Bowman. We're exploring the question, what is your soul food? And we're hearing directly from a group of our listeners and community members about their specific soul food diets of choice. and discussing how these activities and practices builds resilience and leads to improved mental and physical health. Stay with us and we'll be right back after this brief message from our underwriter.
KSQD thanks Family Service Agency of the Central Coast for supporting this program. Family Service Agency provides counseling and support for people of all ages facing life crises and challenges. You can reach them at 423-9444 to see if they can help you. Thank you, Family Service Agency of the Central Coast, for supporting KSQD 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. Well, coming back from the break, we heard next from Annie, and this is a great one to hear. It's just great to hear from a younger adult who's already realized what she needs to do to take care of herself and tend to her own mental health.
Hello, my name is Annie. I am someone with lived experience of mental health challenges, specifically bipolar disorder and depression. And I've also been working at local mental health organizations for the last 5 years. My soul food is yoga. I found it at 16 when my friend dragged me to a hot yoga studio. I made it through my first class as a puddle of sweat, exhausted, but somehow feeling enlightened and full of joy. In the 11 years since then, I've tried all different kinds and am now even certified to teach it. When I do yoga, I feel like a glow stick that's been cracked. I almost always go in stiff, tense, and stressed from the day. But when I start stretching my body and sync my breathing with my movements, I'm met with a sense of peace, ease, and stillness. Everything around me seems to just melt away, and as my physical muscles become more flexible, so does my inner world. I find that even after 10 minutes of this, I have more patience and bandwidth. Yoga is my most favorite way to stay compassionate, relaxed, and in touch with my body. I'm so grateful for it, especially during the pandemic. Thanks for listening.
What a great testimony, I think, to the kind, when she says, I feel more bandwidth, she's specifically talking about this quality of resilience that we're talking about, the ability to come back and meet her life. And as a yoga practitioner myself, for most of my life, since I was 19 years old, I know that I find that I feel tremendous resilience after I practice, even if it's just for 10 or 20 minutes. For many years, I went to yoga classes and I did not practice at home because in my mind, I had this idea that it would need to look like a class and I'd have to practice for an hour and a half for it to mean anything. But finally, it occurred to me to just try. I mean, even if I had 10 minutes. And to my surprise, I found that it's tremendously rejuvenating. It helps me be more focused. It helps me actually release stress from my body. And I feel like she said, I tend to feel joy. I love her description of the glow stick. Makes me feel like a glow stick. That's just a beautiful description of that feeling. And, the other thing that personally I love about yoga is, well, you mentioned, I think in the last show that some people can get caught up in perfectionism. It's not meant to be that. I mean, most yoga is not to be done in a room where there's a mirror even. The idea of it is that it's really for you to go inside and focus on your own process and experience, and there to be room to do it imperfect, that is part of it. And when we've talked also in the last show about mindfulness skills, I was one of those people who felt like I couldn't sit to meditate when I was younger, but yoga I could do because it helped me access the same kind of single focus presence, but in moving my body, it allowed my mind to slow down and be more focused and present. So yoga is not the only practice like that. I think you've mentioned there's qigong and there's tai chi, a lot of moving mindfulness type practices.
And any martial art can actually be helpful too. In the same way, I think you picked out that single focus, and you can actually use massage with a tennis ball or with a foam roller. With the same way, if you focus on the area of your body that is feeling sensation, you get the same mental health benefits. So I could spend the rest of our time talking about the mental health benefits of yoga. I'll name a few. The research shows it reduces stress, it improves mental health and mood. It helps people manage symptoms of anxiety and depression. It helps with sleep, helps with chronic pain. And I'm going to throw a few in that aren't so much mental health because I just think they're interesting. It helps people quit smoking. It helps people lose weight. It helps with symptoms of menopause. It's one doctor said it was as close to a fountain of youth as anything we have. So yoga works by deactivating the stress system, which we've talked about a little bit. And the stress system is made to work in the short term. We need the stress system. We need blood going to our muscles and an increase in glucose to the base of our brain when we need to act in an emergency. But human beings are made to have the stress system activated for very short periods of time. We're made to be in kind of the well-being system most of the time. And when you think of humans in nature, most of the time, nothing would ever change. Things would just be in stasis. And then every once in a while, there'd be the pleasure system come along, some berries on a bush or some fresh meat, I guess. I don't know what, a baby born, or the stress system, being chased or being threatened in some way. And what happens is in our society that we live in, the stress system is activated all of the time. And when the stress system is activated, there are all kinds of things our body says it doesn't need. The digestive system shuts down. That's why we get a dry mouth. The reproductive system shuts down. Higher level thinking shuts down. The glucose goes to the base of our brain instead of our prefrontal cortex. Growth shuts down, the heart rate speeds up, and glucose goes to the muscles. So all of those things are not made to be long-term effects. And when you live in the threat system, it causes all kinds of physical and mental problems. That's why people can't think, they can't remember, they're fuzzy, you don't need to process emotion. You can't process emotion, be in touch with how you feel when you're in the threat system.
And frequently develop chronic health symptoms as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, along those lines, I just want to mention that we have a great video that I'm going to put in the resource list that's on what's called polyvagal theory. And it's a wonderful video that illustrates everything that you were just talking about in a really graphic and easy to understand way. The last thing I want to say about Annie's piece is that we did a whole show on healing the mind and body with yoga therapy. So I encourage listeners to check out episode 39. In this next piece, Carol finds that even in the face of big and scary challenges, making small but regular changes to her self-care practices has significant benefits.
Hello, my name is Carol. My story includes a lifelong struggle with anxiety. I have and continue to struggle balancing a professional career with mindfully raising my two wonderful, now adult children. The younger of the two, my son, has obsessive-compulsive disorder with harm-based intrusive thoughts. He's a sweet man who has intense depth, overthinks absolutely everything, and is fittingly a philosophy major in college. Sadly, just last month, he had a second mental breakdown. He spent a number of weeks in the hospital on suicide watch and is entering a partial hospitalization program this week. He is at home, and I'm currently on leave from work to care for him. As you can imagine, today my cup is runneth over with feelings. I'm grieving and heartbroken for the young man who is trying to cope with a mental illness. I see what it does to his life, and I'm angry at the unfairness of it all. My greatest fear is that he succumbs to his mental state and takes his life. I move from this terrible thought to the less important anxiety caused by his recent exit from college in his senior year. I worry that finishing college may not happen. I just want his life to be easier with less hardship. My mind is exhausted, and all of these thoughts play in my head like a broken record over and over again. I'm doing my best to survive the current storm. In the past, extreme stress saw me either emotionally wrecked, rolled up into a ball in bed, or distracting my mind by taking on large projects around the house with a fury. Through either wisdom with age, spending time with the right people, or just dumb luck, I've thankfully turned more to self-care. I prioritize it now more than ever. To stay mentally balanced, I require weekly therapy sessions, regular meditation, exercise, and massage, planned relaxation, and a good night's sleep. I'm not perfect at any of these and continue to struggle, but the benefits are clear, and food for the soul is a perfect way to describe the small changes that have led me to a happier, more productive life. Today, taking care of myself means that I'm more emotionally available and present for my son. We are meditating together, taking daily hikes, emoting regularly, and talking continually. His mental health is improving a little each day. I know that even through times of strife, prioritizing my soul food means the clouds of anxiety and pain will subside more quickly. Eventually, today's challenges will pass, and life will open up a new window or door where the rays of happiness will once again shine through.
That was just beautiful. It really touched me how hard she worked to give herself a different situation, um, and how much she cared for herself to do that. So, what one of the things that struck me here was her talking about worry. And we're all used to our conditioned coping mechanisms. So we had ways of coping that we learned when we were growing up, and whatever ways we learned were the best ways to get us through the situation we were handed at the time. And then we continue to use them as adults. Carol really figured out to try new ones. She figured out that those weren't working for her, that worrying exhausted her mind and wasn't helpful. And so she figured out how to try new ways to cope, meditating and exercise and massage and sleeping and therapy, hikes and all kinds of things. And she really mentioned self-connecting things and connecting with others. Um, and one little trick you can use is to imagine the future you want for yourself. It's very hard to get there if you can't imagine where you're going. And so maybe not the details, but just what do you want your life to be like in the broad strokes? What do you want to feel like? What do you want your day to be like? How much do you want other people to be in it? What kind of activity do you want? Just in the broad strokes. And if you can imagine your future, that'll give you kind of a measuring stick to try some different things and see whether they're contributing to getting to that future. And I think Carol did that for herself and got herself to the future she wanted with a very a tough situation.
Mm-hmm. Something else that really stood out to me about Carol's sharing was, she's been able to toss aside sort of the cultural negative stereotype or value judgment that we often have about being high maintenance. I guess I want to speak to that some people feel like ashamed of that, or, ashamed of all the things that they might need to feel better. But, some of us are like race cars, and we require high maintenance to be in the kind of shape to meet life's challenges. And taking care of ourselves can be that act of self-love. And she mentioned like a whole array of things that she's aware of now that she really needs to do to feel good, or her better, or her best even. And I just want to encourage people to kind of consider accepting that may be true. We all need some things, and some of us may need more.
And that's a beautiful analogy, because if I can take that analogy a step further, if the race car has everything it needs to run in peak condition, then it is more useful to the people around it. And we're the same way.
You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD, K-Squid, community radio for the Monterey Bay. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. You can find the podcasts of all our shows on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, on the KSQD website, and on your home smart speaker. I'm your host, Debra Sloss, and I'm here today with our guest, psychotherapist Kara Bowman. We're exploring the question, what is your soul food? What are the things you do to meet your mental health and wellness needs? We're hearing directly from a group of our listeners and community members about their specific soul food diets of choice and discussing how these activities and practices builds resilience and leads to improved mental and physical health. I want listeners to know that every State of Mind show has a resource list posted on the ksqd.org/State of Mind webpage. There you can find and listen to all of the soul food recordings you're hearing today, along with a whole collection of soul food resources that have specifically been suggested by our contributors. They run the gamut from books to websites to places to hike, dance classes, self-care suggestions, and helpful apps. I strongly suggest you check out that great list. Now, back to our interview. Well, coming back from the break, this next audio piece reminds us that the one constant is change. In this piece from Kelly, we hear about how she had to adapt the way she finds her soul food as her body has aged and life circumstances have changed.
What is my soul food? The timing of this question is interesting, coming on the heels of a global pandemic, which for me has happened to coincide with an empty nest and the onset of arthritic knee pain, which has rendered me unable to hike, a huge source of soul food in the past. As a semi-retired, long-married, 63-year-old hobbling mother of 2 adult daughters, I have had to reinvent myself and discover new ways to nurture my soul. About 2 years ago, I hired a personal trainer once a week to keep me in shape. This decision, one I almost didn't make for fear of spending too much money or that I should be motivating myself to work out, has turned out to be pivotal. Not only has my trainer become a friend and a regular connection in my life, I'm also getting into better shape than ever despite my knee issue. As I could only afford to hire my trainer one day a week, I sought out friends who might be interested in committing to another weekly workout. The prevalence of Zoom technology helped, as I had access to friends who lived farther away. After striking out a few times, I struck gold with a cousin. We now connect weekly for a workout and have been consistently meeting for over a year. This connection has fed my soul on so many levels. I love that she shows up. I love that we've become closer, and I love that we've been able to share our lives on a weekly basis and get a workout in too. Another source of soul food is my husband. He and I have always been proponents of date night. For years, this has kept us close and connected and fed our souls. Typically, we would head out to the beach and walk for miles. When I couldn't walk anymore, we needed a new plan. I knew he liked to bike ride, so I suggested we make the switch. Now my husband and I ride bikes on date night and have so much fun discovering new routes and paths together. Dropping everything on a Friday afternoon to head out for date night with my husband is something we both look forward to. We both appreciate the commitment and the ritual, and for me, smelling the sweet ocean air from the bike path after dark is thrilling. On my own, I feed my soul by playing music. Although I've not been formally trained, I'm drawn to the keyboard and love to learn and practice new songs. I've become pretty good over the years and enjoy seeing my progress. Sometimes I even get to jam with friends, which feeds my soul even more. And I can't leave out the deliciousness of a morning sunrise, or the sight of a flock of parrots, or a gorgeous peregrine falcon flying overhead. Observing the nature around me is satiating on so many levels. And of course, there are random snacks that show up unexpectedly each week, like a text from my kids or phone calls from friends, an exciting vacation or a stimulating work experience. But when all else fails and the cupboard is bare, I feel like I have successfully cultivated a balanced diet of soul food that I can count on from week to week.
Just love this one. There's so much in there. I'm wondering if you want to take the lead on it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, she really, there's a lot in there about resilience and adaptation. And it struck me that that comes from positive thinking. What can I do instead of backward thinking? What can't I do? So there is room for grief in life, and when there's loss, there's always grief. And then part of grief is looking forward. What does this mean for my new life? And I think Kelly demonstrated that perfectly. She said, "What can I do, and how can I connect with my husband, and how can I get physical activity in a new way?" Um, Another thing that struck me about what she said was the thought that she should be motivating ourselves. And I don't know why this is such a pervasive thought in our society. I wish I could banish it. But somehow we think that things only count if we do them on our own, and they don't count if we do them with help. And I think it's almost the opposite. It's the people who are brave enough to ask for help, who actually get where they want to go, and it's the people who don't ask for help who actually stagnate. And so it actually takes courage to ask for help, and those are the people that we should be using as our role models.
Something else, that a few other things that really stood out to me about it is that the importance of the predictability. And I think we've talked about this before, but Kelly really talks about how having that plan and knowing she can count on it, how helpful that is for her. And I think we heard that certainly in Go's sharing in the last show, when she was talking about having regular games nights or regular Zoom calls with her daughters. That happens to be me. But I think that sometimes we underrate the value of predictability, of having things that are in our schedule or built in that we can count on, that happen with regularity, and the ways in which those things support us in the in-between times. The other thing she talked about is really planning specific time for connection with your significant others. A lot of times we think it's just going to happen because we live with them or we see them every day, but sometimes that doesn't happen in everyday life. And so really setting aside some uninterrupted time, even if that's just sitting together outside for 15 minutes or checking in about how your day was at the end of the day. But those special focused times of connection are really important for people's health and well-being, as you've talked about earlier about the role that connection plays in our health.
And I like how you pointed out that having things to look forward to can feed us in the in-between times. It can also support us logistically. I had a client who had a really big need for having friends in her life. It really supported her emotionally. It really helped her with her depression. And she found it draining to try to set up dates with people all the time. And she ended up setting up regular dates. And just having that logistical support there it gave her so much ease that it was incredibly helpful. So having a regular date night, like Kelly mentioned, can just make it happen, and um, give us that self-care just because it's so much easier to make sure it happens.
Next, we're going to hear from Yvette, and I'm so grateful that she decided to share this piece about the important role creative process can play in feeding our souls.
My name is Yvette, and I've been making art in various forms to feed my soul for more than 30 years. Abstract painting allows me to work through a range of emotions, from my greatest joys to deepest sorrows and traumas. Drawing realistically allows me to focus, relax, and quietly observe the beauty of nature. I find that exercises in painting allow me to travel through my thoughts and engage with my healing on deeper levels. I expand on the concepts relayed to me in therapy as I paint. The energy seems to convert from pain into hope and sorrow into beauty. And that transformation leaves me in a state of empowerment every time. I never know the visual outcome, but I do trust the process. And some of my most beautiful work has emerged as a result of processing some of my deepest sorrows and grief. Drawing from nature allows me to practice mindfulness and engage in the soothing process of observation. It also allows me to set attainable goals and to move from one to the next. These victories propel me forward in the areas of my life that are not quite as easy. Being an art teacher is another form of soul food all its own. Helping people build their creative confidence and expand their abilities to create through life's challenges is incredibly rewarding. My self-talk is an important part of this journey, and wherever I am, I acknowledge my feelings, and even when they're hard, I accept them. At times, I have to redirect my thoughts to all that is possible, to the options that I do have, and to remember the coping skills that I have. I embrace the empowering thoughts and truths that I have at my disposal, and I move my hand through this process. It's like a dance between the mind, the heart, and the hand, whether I'm holding a brush, a pencil, or simply gliding my fingers through the sand. I'm so grateful to have this method of creative expression and to share it with others.
I just love that she calls art a dance between the mind, the heart, and the body, or the hand, she says, but the body, which is something we see in so many of the soul food activities we've been talking about. And she also describes art as a mindfulness tool, that it makes her slow down, pay attention, and practice single-mindedness, just doing one thing at a time. And, as we've talked about before, that can be so regulating for the nervous system, as you described in great detail in our last show last month. But I want to point out that there was a point in my life where I was playing hockey, midlife crisis. And, what drew me to it was I overheard people saying, when I'm playing hockey, it's the only thing I'm doing. And, I had that experience. I was doing it at a time that I was raising 3 kids and working and feeling particularly overwhelmed in my life. And even while it was a, highly active activity, what was amazing about it was that sense that I am only playing hockey right now. And it was so nurturing. And the other thing that she speaks to that has been a theme that we've heard throughout is she talks about the process over the product, that she's not focused on what she's making, that she's making art for beauty. She's focused on the experience of making it. And that's a theme we heard from Michael earlier when he was talking about dancing, and also Suki about playing music in last month's show.
I know, I love what you said. And art actually does put you into that single focused mind. It also puts you in a state of observation. Artists are incredible observers of what they're doing. And that perspective, that observational mind, is very, very good for us, our mental health. So art lowers intense emotions, creates meaning, lowers stress, improves sleep, decreases negative emotions, and enhances positive emotions. And then that piece about just doing it, whether you're good or not. Studies have found that taking a more compassionate approach to personal failure can actually motivate you to improve yourself. So we think that beating ourselves up is the way to improve ourselves, and that actually has a negative effect. And so I'll just give you one example. There are lots of studies out there about that, but researchers found that when people were trying to lose weight and they were self-critical and highly demanding of themselves, they tended to gain weight. And when they practiced self-compassion, they lost more weight than a control group that wasn't engaged in self-compassion. So creating art, creating music, playing hockey, and being compassionate about wherever you are in terms of your skill level can actually motivate improvement. And that can be very satisfying to see improvement in whatever you're doing.
You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD, K-Squid, many voices, one station. and this is State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. I'm your host, Debra Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here with my guest, psychotherapist Kara Bowman. We're hearing directly from a group of our listeners and community members about their specific soul food diets, how they care for their mental and physical health, and discussing how these practices and activities build resilience and lead to improved mental and physical health. So stay with us and we'll be right back after this brief message from our underwriter.
KSQD thanks Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History for supporting State of Mind. Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History offers innovative exhibitions, events, and festivals that celebrate the creativity, history, and traditions of Santa Cruz County. Information about events or how to get involved at santacruzmah.org. Thank you, Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, for supporting community radio KSQD 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. Well, coming back from that last break, we're now entering the last leg of this whole soul food series. And we still have a few more desserts to offer our listeners. This next one particularly resonates with me and speaks about the remarkable sustenance we can often get from nurturing something outside of ourselves.
My food forest garden gifts me an offering of balance, beauty, abundance, and sustenance. Soul food. Each day as I enter and leave my cottage, I notice where new growth is swelling and old growth is ready to retire. Like an artist reworking a canvas, I form and reform, shape and reshape with my clippers, an eye toward texture, color, design. Providing endless bounty, my food forest invites me to conjure new directions in flavor and possibility, and I wait expectantly to see and savor the gifts of my most recent charges. My spindly little Cotto dwarf avocado tree, and my year-old Lapin cherry, which I recently moved to a sunnier curbside spot, where the new COVID-spurred walkers will one day sample them. I wonder how long before I will experience what a Chilean guava will look and taste like, or taste the fruit of my neophyte cactus that clings to walls and bears the trendy dragon fruit that Jamba Juice now lists in their fruit choices. With childlike anticipation, I watch for the springtime swelling of luscious green figs with succulent bright raspberry interiors on my oldest fruit tree, grown from a stick gifted me by a neighbor who belonged to the local Rare Fruit Society. The rosy drapery of my adolescent grapes is almost too lovely to disturb with picking. And I never cease to hope that after more than a decade, the delicate blossoms that paint my tiny dwarf peach pink each year will finally bear more than the one heavenly white peach of last season. I harvest with the anticipation of surprising friends with beautiful and delicious treats. My soul food, so much to care for, savor, and anticipate, that my aches, fears, and loneliness dissolve.
I just love that so much because, we talked earlier about the role that animals can play in regulating us. But personally, I believe in plants as our co-regulators because they never demand too much. And, I have the experience too of just the joy of watching like a flower develop, or the surprise of something budding or leafing out when you weren't looking. And personally, I think that they can be and I also touch my plants like you would animals. I really feel the texture of their leaves. And, I just find that I have to sometimes roll a fruit in my hand to see how it's ripening. And that that physical sensory aspect that you talked about in our first show when you were describing the different types of soul food or of self-care, that I can get that from plants, like our guest Sheila. So I love that she shared that.
Yeah, there is so much in that. I'm glad she used the word savor, because I was thinking of the word savoring the entire time she was talking. So one of the things that stood out to me was that her soul food is small. She likes to go out and look at her plants. And soul food can really be micro moments. Anything that helps relax your nervous system and break the cycle of stress hormones is soul food. And that can be a heating pad behind your back. That can be a picture of your favorite place that you can gaze on throughout the day. That can be a mantra that grounds you. So soul food doesn't have to be some big new skill that you're going out and signing up for and learning. It can be very small, like going out and spending time in your garden. And I really appreciate that about what Sheila brought to us. She also brought in the idea of beauty, sensory pleasure, and the timing in nature's time. So much of our world is human time, and there is something about being brought back to the time of the earth that is, I think the word you used is regulating, and that's a very apt word.
Well, this next piece, both Kara and I just love this and decided to put it here at the end of the series as our most delicious soul food dessert. This next one is short and to the point, but like a good dessert, sweet and very rich.
Hi, my name is Connor, and my soul food quite literally is donuts and sandwiches. I love to have donuts and sandwiches with friends. The beauty of memory is most ingrained in me in nature, going for walks with friends. So my ideal soul food is coffee, donuts, and a nature walk with friends. To make the day even more extraordinary, we would go for a long drive to get a gourmet sandwich in a different town and listen to sentimental music on the car ride there. My soul food helps me with feelings of being stuck when the light doesn't seem to be coming in. It also helps me to feel joy and not think too much. I have been going out of my general way to get gourmet sandwiches for a long time now, and it's been a really helpful practice. Thanks.
Just love that. Thank you, Connor.
Yeah, I don't want to put too many words behind that because I love it too, but we are so cognitive, and so many people talked about not thinking, and including Connor. And I love that. Also food, rituals, comfort, familiarity. He's got it all.
Also I thought about the treasure hunt, that's an activity that a lot of people love, whether that's looking for wildflowers or mushrooms or an antique or the perfect bagel or donut, that in itself can be a very joyful activity that adds novelty and excitement. And then sharing that experience with another person is profoundly connecting too. We hope you've enjoyed this two-part series, Building Resilience, What's Your Soul Food? And if you like today's show, be sure and check out last month's show, episode 42, part 1. All the stories that have been shared here with you demonstrate the creativity, individuality, and capacity of the human spirit. And together we hope they serve as a powerful reminder of the resilience within all of us. Taken together, these stories show us that while we have the ability to meet life's many challenges and recover from traumatic experiences, we also need to nurture ourselves and feed our souls so that when the time comes, we can find that resilience that gets us through. We hope these 2 episodes inspire you to pay closer attention to your own self-care needs, and that the stories you've heard offer models and ideas for new ways to cook up your own full-bodied soul food menu. We hope you will be kind and patient with yourself, and remember, it's the gentle practice of self-care that actually feeds us. I want to say a huge thank you to our guests today, Kara Bowman, and to our contributors for submitting their very special and appreciated soul food audio pieces. And thanks to you for joining us here on State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. We've got some good news. State of Mind will now broadcast and live stream twice a month. So to hear more conversations about mental health and wellness, join us on the first Sunday and the second Monday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. right here at K-Squid 90.7 FM. Special thanks to Jeannie Baldzikowski for audio production, to Jennifer Young for research and outreach, to Leslie Nielsen for outreach, and to Izzy Weiss for marketing. And thanks to acoustic guitarist Adrian Legg for composing, performing, and donating the use of our theme music. You can find all the past episodes of this show on our ksqd.org website by typing State of Mind in the search bar. Listen or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. Or listen through your home smart speaker by saying play State of Mind with Debra Sloss on TuneIn. If you like this or any previous State of Mind episodes, please help the shows get heard and found by more listeners by leaving us a rating and a review on any of the podcast services. In Your Voice are short segments where listeners get to add their voice to the discussion. You can either call in to leave a message or record an audio file right on your phone. Either way, tell us about a mental health experience you've had, something that's contributed to your mental health recovery, or share a resource that's helped you. Submission details can be found at ksqd.org/state of mind. We are now looking for In Your Voice contributions for 2 upcoming shows. The first is for a show learning about mental health recovery following a traumatic brain injury. We're also working on a show looking at the mental health impacts of climate change. If you have experience with either of these, we want to hear from you, and your voice may just be on one of our future shows. This is listener-supported community radio, KSQD Santa Cruz. Just remember, 90.7 FM, K-Squid, your ink spot on the dial. Stay with us.